With an AK-47 tattooed onto his face, career criminal and father of one, Fayez Khan, filmed himself making death threats to Nigel Farage. Khan came into the UK on a boat from northern France, documenting the whole thing on TikTok. The whole thing being actually his journey from Sweden, which is where he came from to get on that boat. He'd originally arrived there from Afghanistan. He'd spent 9 years living in Sweden before he came to the UK in October 2024, and 9 years of being an upstanding citizen in Sweden. Nearly. The court was told Khan had 17 previous convictions in Sweden, including for carrying a knife, threatening behaviour and vandalism. He was also jailed in 2019 after using threatening behaviour towards a public servant. Today, he's beginning a 5-year sentence at His Majesty's pleasure in this country, as he was sentenced for making those threats to Nigel Farage. And as the judge read it all out, Mr Khan was shouting from the dock, quote, "I'm not guilty. I want to fix my life. I want to go back to Afghanistan. I want to go back to my country to see my family. I'm not here because I want to kill him. I have a son. You want to F my life because you want to be Prime Minister. You want to put me in prison. You F'd my life." This from the man with an AK-47 tattooed onto his face, who lied about his name and age on entering Britain illegally, who committed numerous offences in Sweden and is now going to prison here too. Nigel Farage was in court for the sentencing and afterwards said this.
The fact is that in 18 months' time, this violent criminal, somebody with 17 convictions in Sweden, in 18 months' time, he will be in this country, living in a house of multiple occupancy or a hotel. He'll be free to walk the streets whilst his asylum claim is being judged. And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other madder passers are there now in this country? Or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel? A strange twist at the end, when he was after the sentence, and he was speaking from the dock, trying to be heard, making it perfectly clear that he'd rather go back to Afghanistan. Now, in Germany, there are plane loads of people going back to Afghanistan. I wonder if in 18 months' time, the only thing that stops him being on our streets is we have some kind of deal with Afghanistan. Well, he wants to be deported. He said he'd rather go back to Afghanistan. You know, I mean, that's what he wants to do, and we should satisfy that as soon as we can.
Nigel Farage speaking outside court. So what should happen to this man? Paula Rhone-Adrien is a barrister at Lamb Building Chambers. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme, Paula. What should happen to this man in your view? Afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Tom. Thanks for inviting me on. Well, he is now going to serve at least 40% of that 5-year prison term. So 2 years, perhaps we will see him incarcerated for. And during that time, of course, he may well want to make his application for asylum, or he may seek to withdraw his application for asylum, bearing in mind what he was recorded as saying when he was dragged from the courtroom. And so it may be that we're asking this question when actually he's currently instructing his lawyers to withdraw his application and he won't be seeking to remain in the UK.
What if he does? What if he decides once he's in the prison cell he wants to continue with his asylum application here?
Well, as you know, the Home Office, of course, I'm sure, will want to refuse that application just on the basis of the criminal offence, and they're entitled to do so. And then it will be a matter for a tribunal judge to decide whether he should be able to remain or not, whether his application should be granted. And that's a long and drawn-out process, and a process that I know frustrates a lot of your listeners. And actually, if Nigel Farage wanted to do something about his concerns in relation to the criminal justice system, part of that, I would say, is looking at how he can support government agencies like the Home Office, like the court system, to ensure that such applications are dealt with as quickly as possible.
Why would this man be able to make an asylum application to be in the UK, presumably having lived as a result of being from Afghanistan, when he's lived in Sweden for 9 years?
Well, I'm not clear about that, Tom. I have to be frank with you. We don't know the backstory in relation to that. But what I am aware of, generally speaking, is that a number of asylum applications are made from persons who may have been living in another European country first.
Right.
And what happens in those cases are that, of course, they are living in those other European countries, not because they want to. So their end destination is, of course, to get to England or to Scotland, Wales, wherever it is in this great nation. But, of course, that for whatever reason, they have been locked into whatever country they have, and so they haven't been able to make that application. And you said, what right does he have to make the application? Well,
yes.
as again, as you well know, Tom, anybody upon reaching the shores of this great land has a right to make a claim for asylum.
Yes. Although, would it not speak to some sort of fairness in the system to say that your right to make that claim is limited to the point of being withdrawn if you have been sentenced to a long period in prison, certainly over a year, and actually having had a history of past criminal activity? Why should this country provide safe haven to someone who has a track record of doing those things in other safe countries?
And Tom, we are talking about what seems to be a deplorable man who has committed a deplorable crime and who has a deplorable history of committing crimes. Now, in that type of scenario, if you're asking me in the general, should he have the ability to claim asylum? Well, of course they do. Do they get deported? Yes, they do. Do some of those deportations get overturned? Yes, they do. It's all part of what is the rule of law in terms of a democratic society where we ensure that all rights are respected.
Once he's out of prison, whether it's 2 years or 3 or whatever, should he be returned to Afghanistan, in your view?
Well, he's seeking, by all sounds, he's seeking to return to Afghanistan. So we can pay him, can't we? I think we offer to pay people, to repatriate people. Well, I'm sure he'd be willing to take the money to be repatriated if that's what he sought to do. Should the court, should the tribunal order his return? Again, I don't know the facts of this case, so we need to be careful, but we know that there are cases when that does happen. I have to say, however, in this case, I am slightly confused about Nigel Farage's position in general in relation to this gentleman who made those threats to kill. You know, Lucy Connolly was, of course, invited on stage at the recent Reform Party conference, where she had, of course, we know, received a 31-month sentence for inciting people to go and burn down hostels. And so we do need to be careful, and I think Nigel Farage needs to be careful to really explain himself as to where he sees his policies in terms of threats of violence, threats to kill, etc., where he really places himself. Because I think we've heard enough, haven't we, Tom, about two-tier justice, when actually what we can see is when the courts are finding that somebody has committed an act, they, of course, provide hand down a sentence.
Is that to suggest, Paula, that you think Nigel Farage, not brought this on himself, but reaped what he sowed, or something like that?
Well, it is confusing for me, and I'm grappling, I have to be frank with you, to understand why Lucy Connolly was invited on stage to the Reform Party, but Mr Khan, for example, wasn't invited on stage. As far as I'm concerned, all acts that incite or threaten violence should be called out, all of them. And so I am confused about the differentiation between the two, but I'm sure Nigel Farage will tell us at some point. The fact is, here we see, because as I said, I'm slightly tired about hearing this two-tier justice system that I work within that, frankly, I don't understand. Here we have Mr Khan being handed down a 5-year sentence, and I appreciate that he will probably only serve 40% of that. But that's because of the dire straits that our criminal justice system is in. And I'm yet to hear Nigel Farage really talk about his policies in relation to that.
Although it does seem weird, just finally, Paula, that there could be a situation in which this man comes out of prison continuing his asylum claim, the Home Office rejects it, but a judge says, no, you're not allowed to reject it, you have to go ahead with it, even though this man is now saying, I want to go back to Afghanistan, whatever. That does not seem right to people. As I think most people would say is reasonable given this man's previous background. Once he's released from his prison cell, he's on a plane back to Afghanistan within a week.
Well, here we see what is the straits, I suppose, the dire straits between what is legally appropriate and then what you consider, your viewers consider to be morally appropriate. And so what is right is that he has access to due process, to that legal due process. However disgusted we are, or we may be, at his actions, it is important that he has access to that right and to due process to take place.
As long as that due process doesn't come up with a result that nobody wants, other than him, which is to give him asylum here.
It's not for a judge to make a decision on the basis of what makes us feel good, Tom. It's a matter for the judge to follow the law and to apply.
But why is the law allowing for a man with 17 previous convictions in Sweden, a jail sentence in Sweden, a jail sentence here? Why is the law even possibly allowing for a set of circumstances in which that person would be granted asylum here? He spent 9 years in Sweden.
And of course, it's important to point out that we don't know if the law is going to allow this. You know, this is just supposition from us. And what I'm saying to you is that where we are saying very clearly, we do not know. It's really important to focus on the we do not know. What we don't want to do is to enrage people, frustrate people, to anger people, to have discussions, for example, around let's leave the ECHR when we actually don't know what the outcome is going to be. And in any event, leaving the ECHR may not answer all the problems that we think exist within this problem.
Paula, thank you. Paula Rhone-Adrien is a barrister at Lamb Building Chambers. So 2 points then. What should happen to this man? The due process that he's afforded, etc., etc.? Just once he's finished his time in prison, thank you very much. You came here after spending 9 years in a safe country where you committed 17 offences. You're not going to spend another day. Why should we grant you any form of protection from anything or anyone, particularly when you say you want to go home? Go home. And the second point is on this Lucy Connolly business. If inciting violence requires a prison sentence for this man, as it does, absolutely, what is the difference between the incitement to violence of him and the incitement to violence of others, including Lucy Connolly, where Nigel Farage is rather less sure that she should have got a prison sentence?